Action.
Hey, welcome to the AfterWord. This is the beginning of season, guess what?
Well, you've already told us, so we know.
You already know.
Yeah.
I guessed 17, though, and I was wrong.
A little high. Season 13.
Lucky number.
And to Kirsten's point, some seasons have been, 2 episodes long? This one will be a few more episodes than that. We do
It's gonna be a few more.
Yeah, we do a new season like every book that we're looking at. And so this is season 13. This is the AfterWord, a podcast produced. Not produced.
Produced makes it sound a little more than it needs to sound.
By the Town Church, looking at what was just preached. Now, there are some changes to season 13, how we're going to approach this a little bit. But before
That's exciting.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You helped.
I'm excited about this.
I'm joined by Vince, Kirsten, Betty, and I'm Eric. Here are a couple of changes before I ask our exciting intro question. And really, this is the one change I wanted to mention. We are, instead of asking various questions of the text every week, we're going to ask the same 3 questions every week. The first question being around context, which is really understanding the passage better. And that will include a quick recap from Vince or whoever the preacher was. Mm-hmm. The second question that we're going to ask is, what is God like according to the text? We don't want to miss that. And then the last question will be, what difference could or does that make? Either what we're seeing in the text or how we're seeing God in the text. So maybe a little bit of an application there. Context, what is God like and what difference could or does that make? And we'll see how it goes. I don't know. Maybe we'll change it if this doesn't work. But here's the intro question.
How are we going to know if it doesn't work?
We'll probably get tons of angry emails about by our one listener.
Mm-hmm.
Send them to Eric at the Town Church.
ERICK.
Yeah. Here's our intro question. What was one of the best things over Christmas break for you?
Nothing. No one has an answer.
I think for me, just the slower schedule. I didn't really sleep in. I slept in till like 6 instead of 5. So I guess I did sleep in, but slower schedule. Don't have to rush out the door in the morning. Can be up later at night with the boys, not concerned about them having to wake up for school. So I just enjoyed being able to slow down.
Yeah.
This year, for the first time ever, I went and made mochi with my extended family.
Explain what that is.
They're just
extended family?
Yeah, so it's family
mochi.
that aren't like my immediate family. No, it's like pounded like rice cake things, but I feel like a lot of people are really familiar with like mochi ice cream, but it's just the dough, like in mochi form.
Kind of like a dessert, kind of.
No,
right? No?
Like on its own, it's like more savory, but my grandma also makes one where she puts like anko, which is red bean paste in it. So those are sweeter, but it's usually just like just the rice or like the rice and some kind of filling. Yeah, but I've never gone before. So it was fun to go and see extended family, and my brother and his family were there too. And it was great to have them there.
And your brother has a son named...
My brother has a son named Theophilus.
Huh.
Yeah.
Yes.
I wonder if that will tie into the conversation today.
Back. Yeah.
Cool. Vince?
I don't know. Yeah, you talk for a little bit, and I'll try to think of it.
What if I said within the last 2 months?
No. Let's go with your question. I don't want to be like some.
He just looked at Kirsten.
Hey, I answered the question.
You did
precisely.
answer.
You did.
Yeah, great work, Kirsten.
And first, okay?
My family moved over Christmas break, which was amazing.
To a new house in town.
To a new house in town.
The process of moving was not amazing.
Horrible. I never want to do it again.
Yeah, but actually being moved is what's amazing.
Yeah, the end result has been great. What about you, Vince?
Yeah, it's similar to Kirsten's. I was trying to think of something new and exciting, but it's similar to Kirsten's. Just a slower pace. Asher, who doesn't live at home, was around a lot more too, so that was fun. We watched movies and played. I'm not a gamer. I'm not a game player, but we did play some games, and that was tolerable, and that was fun. It was fun.
We got a new game.
Yeah, new game. So that's
what was
fun.
it?
What game?
Sky Joe.
Oh, that game's fun.
It's fun.
You like Sky Joe?
And it's good for all
Come on
levels.
over and play Sky Joe. Yeah, it can
Not
hit.
heard of it.
It hits all of our different levels of people in our house. Doesn't take a whole lot. upstairs, but
which is great. That's why I like it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Are we ready to move on now?
Yeah, Eric's, that was long enough, wasn't it? I'm tired of that garbage.
Vince, give us a quick recap of the passage.
Yeah, again, recap for the beginning is always a little bit challenging because it's not a whole lot of text, but we started the book of Luke, the gospel according to Luke, and it will be a long series, 75 weeks, as we cover the book, and I've broken it. I actually when I started breaking it all down, I tried to get it in large enough chunks that we weren't in it for a long time, and it just didn't seem possible, the way that Luke wrote, to spend so much time in different things. So 75 weeks of the book of Luke. Sunday we went through who the author is and what the genre of the book is and the purpose of Luke's writing, and also the theme or themes of why he has written. So that's what we work through just to get some background to the book of Luke before we jump into it. And then we just covered the first 4 verses, the intro from Luke, where he gives a very formal way of writing to Theophilus, who, from my perspective, is probably a patron who has hired Luke to compile the history of Jesus' life and what happened after the life of Jesus in the church because of Jesus. So he just gives this intro to Theophilus for the writing that is to come. And he says at the very end, he's written it so that Theophilus may have certainty concerning the things you have been taught. So his purpose in writing is so that the things that he's already heard about Jesus, he would have certainty about those things because he's now experienced the life of Jesus in writing.
Thanks. And so now for this first section, we're going to either take questions that have been emailed in or ask questions if there's other things about the text we're curious about. And whoever preached may or may not have the answer, right? And it may be somebody else in the group that we have some thoughts toward that, and maybe not. But this is a spot now for that. So I want to ask 2 questions that were sent in. By the way, if you do have questions about the text that you'd like some more discussion about, send them in. And if you send it to, probably just send it to me. That'd be the quickest way. Eric, ERIC, @thetownchurch.org, and we'll get them forwarded in. So here's the first question. Where does Luke fall, the writing of Luke, fall on the timeline of the other books in the New Testament? Do you have a sense of that?
Like, when was it written? Or
yeah.
Yeah.
And was it before or after the other Gospels?
Yeah.
Where does it fall in?
Well, clearly it was written after Mark because Luke uses much of Mark for his writing. 40% of the book of Luke is more or less word for word from Mark. He takes it from Mark. So it was written after Mark. It was written before John. John, the Gospel according to John, is probably the last of the Gospel accounts, potentially even the last of the books of the Bible, of the New Testament, of the Bible, that were written. Luke was probably written, this gets tricky because Luke writes Luke and Acts is the second book, the follow-up of Luke. And the book of Acts goes all the way up and kind of has this abrupt ending where Paul's missionary journey ends. And it's thought that Paul is killed not much after the book of Acts, and that's around 60 to mid-60s. And so it was written before that, but not much before that. Probably because Luke says in Acts, my first book, Theophilus, I wrote to you about these things. So it was written before Acts, but not much before that. So probably mid-50s.
So a couple of decades of ministry and activities have been happening after Jesus rose.
Yep. So he took all that time to compile all the information, to research and study Mark. A lot of these things are hypothetical or guesses, but from what what people have put together, it's likely that he interviewed people who were there, eyewitnesses who were there. So that took some time. Writing it all out took some time. So yeah, somewhere in that category, if that answers the question.
Yeah, I think so. Here's a follow-up question to that. At the end of our passage, verse 4, Luke writes this, speaking or writing to Theophilus, he says, that you may have certainty concerning the things you have been taught. So another question that was sent in was, where did Theophilus get his original account of the gospel that Luke is now confirming or elaborating upon? Any idea?
Yeah, again, speculation, but it could have been Mark. I mean, he could have also had reference to Mark's gospel account. Probably, though, it was more likely in the setting of the context they were in, probably oral tradition or passed on to him from people who were around. And we're not that far after the life of Jesus. So, we're talking probably 20, 30, 40 years.
Yeah, so people are still alive.
Yeah, people are around. They were there. They could have their own picture of it. So it was likely, and as a Gentile Christian, that's later on too. So he's heard these things from other people. So my perspective is that it's probably likely it's been passed down orally. He's heard stories of it or sermons of it, and so this is the way my mind works out. And this is me making it up, but I can imagine Theophilus hearing some of these things. That he's a Gentile Christian. He's been converted. Somehow he knows Luke. He's heard these things. He's like, this is amazing. I want to know more about this. And so he either hires Luke or grabs Luke to say, can you do some research and come back and fill me in on all these gaps that I have of the life of Jesus.
The thought of Luke interviewing Mary or others is bizarre and yet amazing. Like almost investigating. I know he's probably already a believer. He's been with Paul, but now he's going around to eyewitnesses and asking questions of and getting their stories. Yeah,
and again, this is just me imagining, but I can imagine Luke. I just picture this, older, caring guy.
Oh, yeah.
Sitting down with Mary, who's also older, clearly, right? And just like over tea, I don't know if they had tea then, and just saying, hey, can you tell me some of the stories.
Start at the beginning.
Yeah, start at the beginning. Yeah. What do you remember? And and again, speculation, but she goes off on, well, my cousin and this happened and then this happened. And as I remember it, this is how it all went down. So it's pretty fascinating to think about.
Yeah, it's interesting also to read the gospel account and just wonder, like, who did he interview to get this information? Like, I was reading through Luke, I've been reading it over the last several months, and I was thinking about like the whole scene that takes place inside of Herod's palace, and whenever his daughter dances, and then they ask for John's head on a platter. And I just think, I've wondered, like, how do they know that? But, I'm like, well, maybe it was it Susanna that was married to one of the officials in Herod's?
I don't remember.
I can't remember. Anyway, one of the women that...
Was it Jennifer?
I don't think it was Jennifer.
Christina?
No,
maybe?
I don't think that. I think it was maybe Susanna. But anyway, there was a woman that's married to one of Pilate's officials or Herod's officials. And I think there's a high probability that she was there. And then she could have then relayed that on to Luke. Again, all speculation. But there have been times I've been reading and thinking, how does he know this?
Yeah. Did he track down the shepherds?
Yeah.
And we don't know.
Yeah.
It's interesting to think about, though.
It's fun to think about.
Yep.
Anything else about this passage? I know it's a short 4 verses, or Luke in general as we get into it, that you're curious about?
Yeah, one of the things that I've been asked, and it was something that I studied, is the name Theophilus is a name in Greek that means beloved by God. And so there is a thought that Theophilus is not a person, but it was just a moniker in place of the people who Luke was writing to. So Gentile people, so that they would know. These people loved now by God, that they would know with certainty the things that they've been taught. And lots of people think that it was written, Theophilus is not a real person because he's not mentioned anywhere else except for in Betty's family.
Yeah, he's the cutest baby in the world. Yeah. That's what we know about him.
But I don't take it that way because it would seem strange that Luke would call him the most excellent Theophilus. That like there's a name that he has very formally attributed to this person, and that he follows up with it in the second account and says, "This is, I'm writing to you again, Theophilus." Mm-hmm. So I don't lean in that direction. I don't have any evidence other than it seems like this is how he would start something to a real person.
And you had mentioned to me, I don't know if you said this in the sermon or not, that Luke is the longest gospel by word count.
Yeah.
And if you add Acts to it, didn't you tell me that Luke by word count wrote most of the New Testament then?
Wrote more of the New Testament than anyone else.
Yeah, which I always thought was Paul.
No, yeah.
Because of all the letters, but by word count, it's actually
28 chapters in Acts and 24 in Luke, but word count by far by word count the gospel according to Luke is I think 1,000 words more than any other. Matthew is 28 chapters as well, but it's longer than that.
And what strikes me with that is that he is coming into it basically saying like I've investigated. This is orderly according to his words. Yeah, it isn't just. I mean, none of the Gospels are stuff that I made up, but it's very kind of, let's put it in the right place. Yeah. Systematic, I think is the word that you used yesterday. Yeah. I don't know. I think it just bolsters some confidence in the events. Like we have a little investigator back in the 50s maybe.
Yeah, it reminds me, I listened to a couple sermons last week on lectures on the background of Luke, and one of the people gave several different categories of who Luke was, and it was like he's a doctor, he's a historian, he's a theologian, and this person said a systematic theologian. So he very systematically he put in orderly account how these things would play out, and he was also a pastor, that he cared very deeply for Theophilus, that he would know with certainty these things that he's heard over time. So those are the categories of who Luke is. I actually think it's fascinating to think a guy who wasn't here wrote these things, but he didn't do it based on just making stuff up. He very carefully researched and got eyewitness accounts of it and did all the background.
Well, and that his eyewitness accounts also track well with the other Gospels that were written.
Right.
And so, I mean, they're all consistent and they all tell the same stories. I don't know, that's fascinating to think through that, had he interviewed all these people about what happened, there could have been all these different perspectives. And that's maybe why you see different sides of the same story, but it all tracks consistently with the other Gospels.
Yeah, like I said, 40% of Luke is almost verbatim from Mark. There's 20% of the book of Luke that comes from a different source. They think probably it's in scholarly writings the Q source, and so 20% of it comes from that source. So he's taken big chunks from other people that he's interviewed, that he's researched, that he's gotten eyewitness accounts from that are different than the other gospel accounts.
So two thoughts. One, that means that there's several texts circulating by the time that Luke writes of sharing the stories of Jesus and what he did. Yeah. And at the same time, there are still eyewitnesses who are still alive who actually saw those accounts, which bolsters our confidence that they're true, because eyewitnesses could easily debunk it and say, no, actually that didn't happen. Right. But that's not. To your point, Kirsten, they're all telling the same story. Right. Which bolsters confidence in me. The second, this is actually a question for you, Vince. Yesterday, when you talked about the orderly part of how Luke wrote, you mentioned timelines. And I don't know this about the gospel. Does Luke tend to write from beginning to end, or does he group things thematically, or a little bit of both?
I think it's a little bit of both, and we'll see it as we go. That was the reason I had such a hard time outlining it in a shorter, in larger chunks that would make the series shorter, because it hops around. I mean, it's 8 verses about this, and then 10 verses about this, and then 15 verses about something else. So it does hop, but many times it does say things like, and then he went. So there's a connection to the very next thing. It is a flow of how Jesus walked from place to place or spent time in different places and moved.
Which would be very different than some of the other Gospels where it's grouped very differently rather than from beginning to end, thematic or something else. Yeah. Okay. All right. Anything else context-wise before we move on? So here's my next question. So I know it's only 4 verses. It's intro. But what do we pick up even from this about what God is like according to these first 4 verses here in Luke?
I mean, one of the things that stands out, I'm talking a lot. I want other people to talk. But one of the things that stands out right away is that we have a God who desires for the truth of who Jesus is to be known in detail, not just, hey, believe me, kind of wording, but in detail, that it's been written out not just in Luke but in 4 accounts and then a follow up in Acts. We have the kind of God who I was thinking. I think I in one of the gatherings I prayed in this way that we have a God who's moved toward us. Jesus is Emmanuel. He's moved toward us, and at the same time, he wants us to know him so that we would move toward him. And he's given us a very detailed way to look at that. It's fascinating.
Yeah, I would second that, but then add to it too that it is not just for Theophilus, whoever that might be, or not just for a very specific group of people, but God desires to be known by the world. This has implications too for how we engage the world around us, which I realize might be answering the next question a little bit. So maybe, do I stop there? I don't know. But yeah, that it's not just to Theophilus and who this is dedicated to, but it's to us as well. And it's to the ends of the earth.
I was just looking at the cross references in this verse, and one of them is Acts 2:36. Let all the house of Israel therefore know for certain that God has made him both Lord and Christ, this Jesus whom you crucified. And then also 2 Peter 1:16, for we did not follow cleverly devised myths when we made known to you the power of the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ, but we were eyewitnesses of his majesty. And so I just think that God put faithful men in place who were willing to sacrifice their lives to testify about the certainty that we can have because of this. And I don't know, it makes me think that God uses, again, broken, flawed people to carry on his message, and yet what he's written for us in his word is what we need to know. And that's just kindness from him, because like Vince said, he could just say, this is who I am, you have to believe. But he's given us a narrative to follow so that we can have certainty.
I think that's what strikes me out of here. Something similar, that God's knowable. We can actually put into words the story of Jesus and things that Jesus taught. It makes sense, at least to a degree, where God isn't just pure mystery. There'll always be mystery involved, but it's not just pure mystery. I mean, we have this investigator, in my words, Luke, put an orderly account of what happened, and there's salvation in here. So a knowable God is a huge thing. That's the Christian God. So what differences does this make? Could this make either what we see of God here or anything related to our beginning of Luke here in the first 4 verses?
I mean, Luke is writing so that Theophilus can have certainty, and I think that's what God wants for us. And so I think as we're studying and reading Luke and sitting under the teaching of the Word, we can know that the purpose that this whole narrative was written was for our certainty.
Yeah.
I was getting into it earlier, but yeah, that it is for all. And I don't know. I mean, I think that frames or impacts a lot of what my life is about to really become, is that this gospel is for the world and for people in Japan who have never heard it before, and that God wants them to know with certainty who he is as well.
Yeah, an account that was written 1950 years ago to be used in Japan for people who have never heard of Jesus That's powerful.
Yeah, I think I'm not going to get maybe as spiritual as you all, but I think it's good for us. What difference does it make? I think it makes a difference that we can see Jesus, that we see that he became man, and that we can walk through the accounts of his life and the miracles that he did and the people he interacted with, and that he's not a God who's far off, but he's a God who's come near, and we can see that.
Yeah. Yeah, I think one of the things that comes to my mind as we're going through Luke over these next 74 weeks plus, we get to think well about it, right? Luke put together an orderly account so we could have some certainty. So let's use our heads, use our minds well. We get to think through any and every layer and go as deep as we possibly can with all of Luke, and it's not going to fall apart. So we get to do that as Christians.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's the intro to Luke. Vince, where are we heading next week?
We're doing Luke 1:5 through 25. So 20 verses, 21 verses. I'd encourage you to be reading ahead. We're taking this as a family, and I told a few of you earlier, we're reading the passage every day that we're going to be looking at on Sunday, just to have it in our hearts and minds. But I'd encourage you to be reading ahead, looking ahead, having discussions with people, writing notes, taking down some thoughts about what's going on here. So it's kind of strange. We just finished Christmas, and now we're heading back into Christmas.
It'd be really familiar passages the next few weeks.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Thanks for listening, and talk to you later, I guess.
Adios.
Bye.